In this session, we try to understand what are the rules and regulations you have to follow whenever you work with if-else statement. If-else statement is very simple, right? You have to write if of condition, then you execute some code, else you execute some code. That's it. But there are certain kind of rules which are very important for you to follow.
Hey, thanks for watching our content so far. If you're new to Training Monk, we're the fastest growing technology training company and create content to help freshers like you to master the disruptive technologies like full stack development, AML, cloud, DevOps, etc. If you like the content so far, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon not to miss any new content from us. Like and share this video with all your friends. Let's build your career and the community together.
Now let us understand those rules programmatically. To demonstrate that, let me take a new Java class. So I'll just call this as if-else rules. Now here, let me take the main method and then mention the rules one by one. The first and foremost rule is the condition must be evaluated to only Boolean. So whatever you write in if-else, right? So if of this condition, right? The condition always should be evaluated to a Boolean value only. So apart from the Boolean value, you're not supposed to pass any other data type into the condition. So you might use relational operators and then logical operators to combine conditions, but ultimately it should give us only true or false. So let us see with an example. Suppose here I have just I'm taking a number, okay, so which is some 5,000, okay. So now here I'll just say if number, okay, I'll just check whether it is a even number or a odd number, a very simple program, right? So how do you say whether it is an even number or an odd number? So the even number or odd number will be checked by if the number is divisible by 2, then it is even number, else it is odd number, right? So now, or if you want to take this as an input, you can take it using scanner, but here I'm just explaining the rule, so I just directly take a number. Now let us say this 5,000, I want to check whether it is a even number or an odd number. So what I need to do, now I'm performing an operation, number reminder to, here I'm not taking division. Why? Because the division gives you the resultant, but what I need here is the reminder. If the reminder is 0, then only I can say it is divisible by 2, right? So then we need to take this, the reminder or modulus operation. So the number divided by see what actually happening here. So the number divisible by 2 basically provide you an int, right? So it's an operation, but what the compiler is saying, hey, you provided int, but what actually I required is a Boolean. So what I can do, can I do with equal 0? No, here you can't do with equal 0, right? So when I do equal 0 again, so it's an illogical statement, because whenever you perform a particular operation here, you have to check it with a condition, right? So now here I'll do double equal 0. So whenever I change this to double equals to 0, now you can see that the error gone, and then it says that, hey, this is now Boolean, right? So now the condition is always true, right? So it could be either Boolean, true or false, that whatever based on the number of values. So now I'll say s out, right? So the number plus is even number, right? And then else it is an odd number. So now what I do here, I'll just go to the end and then add else block and write s out, and then number plus is odd number, right? So now if I run this code, now let us see what basically happens. So I'm just running my code. So now 5,000 is an even number, so I'll just get it as an even number. Suppose if I take some other number, 5235 or whatever, so this is an odd number. So when I run this, so you're going to get that this is an odd number, right? So a very simple one. So but always this condition must be evaluated to a Boolean, right? So very important. Now the second one, right? Or we'll see with a different example, right? So now I'm just saying a boolean, okay? Or let me take the number itself, that whatever we have. So can I say something like this? If number plus plus or any arithmetic operation, I should not do. What basically happens is, this is basically a number. Again, it will be int, right? So can I do something like this? If number equals 0? No. Again, what actually happens? This is assignment. You are assigning 0 to number. So this is assignment operator, right? Not a relational operator. So again, the resultant will be an int. That's the reason again you'll get an error. So here the IDE is suggesting, hey, can you replace this equal with double equal, so that it will be a comparison operator. So something like that you should be very careful to do. So now let me take with another example. Suppose I have a boolean, right? I'll say is over speed, or I'm just taking some variable, okay? So now I'm just defining is over speed is equal to true, right? Now what I do here, and then I'll also take in speed, or I'll take by speed, right? So now I'm just assigning with speed with some value called 120, right? So now I'll just take if is over speed, right? So now guys, try to understand what I'm trying to do. I'm now speed, right, minus equals some 30. So I'm reducing the speed by 30. So now what I'm doing here is, now there is a boolean variable is over speed. I'm assigning this to true, okay? Or you can take it as an input, whatever. So just to demonstrate these rules, I've just taken the value. Now I just have a speed. The speed is 120, which is initialized. Now I'll say if over speed, right? Then what I'm doing, if this over speed is true, right? I don't need to check it like this. So why I don't need to check it like this? Over speed is equals to true. You can do this, but it is not required. Why? Because this itself is a boolean. You don't need to compare it with a boolean. That's why you see that. So the IDE is suggesting is over speed double equals to true can be simplified to just is over speed. You don't need to check it whether true or false, right? So this is what is boolean. So other than boolean, if you have any numbers or whatever, then you can check them with a comparison. So since you're directly passing a boolean value here, you don't need to do it. That's the reason what it is asking is, hey, just simplify this with is over speed, right? So now that's the reason what we do. We just simply pass is over speed. Now since over speed value we're giving it as true, then the speed value, which is 120, I'm reducing it to this. So now what I do, else I will increase the speed with plus equals by 30. Okay, so now here, if it is over speed, I'm decreasing the speed by 30, or if it is not over speed, I increase the speed with 30. So now let me say that what is the updated speed, right? I'll say updated speed. So this is the compound of assignment operator, which we have already discussed. So now I'll say plus speed, right? So now if you can see this, so now let me run this. Now you see what is basically happening. The overspeed is true. That's why this condition is true. The speed is reduced. The updated speed is 90. Suppose if I make this as false. Now what basically happens? So I'll say, hey, overspeed is false. Then if it is false, I still can increase my speed. So I'm now increasing it to 30. So now if I go this, so now the updated speed will become okay. So now the problem here is, because the value that whatever you have here is minus 128 to plus 127 only. That's the reason you always will get something like this. So if you want to do this, so always you have to take the appropriate data type, right? So I'm just increasing the range of this variable. So now if I run this, so basically what basically happens, now you see that 120 is appended with 30 or increased to 150. So something like that, you always need to be sure like what kind of a data, that value that you're going to take, right? So now this is what is the rule number 1. Now let us understand what is the rule number 2, right? Now the rule number 2 is if can be written without else, but else cannot be written without if. So means in some situation I just check only if, I don't need to check else. Okay, so in that case if can be written alone, so without else. But when you're using else, you should definitely have if. Okay, now example, I'll just take this. I'll say if, okay, just to demonstrate int okay, now I reinitialize number to some 10,000 or whatever. So now I'll say if number greater than 5,000, right? So now what I do here, I'm just writing s out, right? Number is or I'll say, right, number plus is greater than 5,000. Okay, so I don't need to check whether it is lesser than this value or whatever the value. I just need to check whether it is crossing the benchmark or whether it is crossing a particular thing. Or example, suppose I can take another example to demonstrate. Example, byte age. Okay, now I'm just giving the age value as 20. Okay, now I'll say if age is greater than 18, right, or greater than or equal to 18, then you're allowed to cast your vote, right? So now I'll say here within this, you are allowed to cast vote. I just want to check only this one. So if this criteria is satisfied, I just want to execute this. I don't want to write any else in my requirement. In this case, I can write if directly, right? So now when I run this code, so what basically happens is, since I have given 20, now then it says you are allowed to cast your vote, right? So suppose if I give lesser value, what basically happens? Suppose I just give only 15. Now in this case, what actually happens? Now since you have the value 15, the condition false, it doesn't do anything because you are checking only if, and then this will become independent, right? So example, so guys, very important here, just to say you are not allowed to cast vote, okay, or something like this. So now in this case, what basically happens? Now this age is 15, the condition is false, so it will come and then execute this. You are not allowed to cast vote. Let me run this. So what is the output that I'll get? I'll get here is you are not allowed to cast vote. That is cool. Suppose if I give this as 25 again, now what basically happens now? Now when I run this, you can see that you'll get you are allowed to cast vote and you are not allowed to cast vote, right? Because this now become an independent one. It has nothing to do with this if. Because this statement is dependent on if. Now this statement is a normal statement. It does not depend on any condition. So that's why you should be very careful of writing this kind of code. Usually what we do, we write that in else block, right? So this is what we do, right? So this is what we do. We write it in else block. Then it is cool. So now it will say, hey, either you are allowed to cast your vote, or if I give a value less than 18, so then you're going to get you're not allowed to cast vote. So this is a proper basic if else statement, right? So now else can be written with if can be written without else, but else cannot be written without if. So meaning if I write something like this, okay, now as a saying that casting vote result of whatever. So I'm just writing some dummy data. Now see what actually happened. Now you see immediately you got an error here saying that else without if. Why? Because this is allowed and this is a normal statement, but for this else there is no if condition. So that's why these kind of statements you should not write. So that is what is basically the rule number 2. Else you cannot write it. You always need to be ensure that if you're writing else, there should be a proper if and there should not be any statements in the between. So that's what rule number 2. Now let us understand rule number 3. So what is rule number 3? Is suppose if you have only one statement which is dependent on if. Example, if only one statement is dependent on either if or else, you no need to write curly braces. So you don't need to write them. So but if you look at here, as you see this particular logic or this particular logic, right, the even number or an odd number, or whether you're checking the age for casting your vote, you have only one statement to execute, right? Here also you have only one statement to execute. In this case, you don't need to write these curly braces. The curly braces always represents a group of statements. But here, if you don't have any group of statements, you can simply eliminate them, right? So now what I'm doing here is, so I will just take another example here, just to say, like byte casting vote age or something like that, because we already defined age, right? So now I'm just defining the value is something like 25 or whatever. So now if I'm checking the same logic, right? If casting vote age is greater than or equal to 18 or whatever, so then I will say that s out, right? So the same example you can do with age only, because we have already written that. I'm just taking another variable. I'll say that you are allowed to cast vote, right? Now else, simply I'll say that, else s out, you are not allowed to cast vote, right? So now this is what is basically if else without any curly braces, means only one statement is depend on if and only one statement is depend on else. So in this case also it is legal, so you don't need to write curly braces. Now you see you're allowed to cast vote because the casting vote what we have given is 25. So this is what is rule number 3. Now let us talk about rule number 4, right? So guys, all these rules will help you out writing proper code whenever you trying to solve real-time problems. So this is what is really important to understand how you write a proper code, or which is having more readability, right? So then the rule number 4 is, suppose you have this nested if else, right? So basically this nested if else is also called as if else ladder. Okay, so the another name for this is, we generally call this as if else ladder, because it looks like a ladder. You have if else or something like that, right? That's why it is named as if else ladder. Nested if else can be simplified. Okay, so what do you mean by nested if else can be simplified is, now we'll take a simple example here to demonstrate, right? Suppose I'm just giving a variable average marks. Okay, so if you guys remember that we have seen a example how do you calculate average marks of a student, right? You have individual subjects, then you calculate total marks and then average marks and something like that. Now here I'm just giving directly the values. Example, I will just say that it is 77.5 F or something like that, right? Now I want to calculate the grade of a student based on average marks. So how do you basically calculate grade of a student based on grade, right? So now how do you basically calculate? There are certain kind of rules will be there, right? Example, suppose if the average marks, right, is greater than or equal to 70, then I'll give him grade A, right? Or else if the average marks is in between 60, okay, or in between 60 and 70, right, then we'll give grade B. Or I'll say just greater than 70, not 70, okay. So then else if, right, the average marks are in between, okay, 50 and 60, then we'll give them grade C. Okay, now let us say else, I'll say failed. Okay, now failed we will just represent it with capital F or something like that. So how do you basically calculate the grade of a student, right? To calculate the grade of a student, I have average marks. So now typically how do you write if else for this? First I'll say if average marks is greater than 70, right? So then I'll say grade. Okay, now for defining grade I need a variable. So what I do, I'm now taking a character variable here, character grade, right? Now I'm initializing the grade. So here I'm not initializing. Why? Because there is no point to initialize this variable here, because the grade value will be calculated based on the logic, right? So if the average marks is greater than 70, then only the grade value will be A. So there's no point if I give a grade value A here, right? So it doesn't make sense. Because why do you initialize the grade value here itself? Because we want to calculate this. So that's why it doesn't make sense to give the value here. So I'll say average marks is greater than 70. Then the grade I'll give is A. Okay. Now I'm writing the condition, right? So usually how do I write? Else I'll write, and then inside this I will write if, right? And then I'll say, hey, average marks is greater than or equal to 60 or greater than 60, and average marks is less than or equal to 70, right? Then I will say, hey, grade is equal to B, right? So this is what is basically the else if ladder. This is how we write, but it can be even simplified. So how it can be simplified is, you don't need to write the ladder something like this. So simplify, how do you write this? So simply you delete this, okay, and you can write else if within the same line. So now I'll say, hey, if this is true, else if, right? So else if means it is writing a curly brace, and inside this if will work, right? Suppose if I don't need this also, I can remove this. So now if you can see this, all of these we are writing in a single line, right? Now I'll say else if, right? I'll say average marks is greater than 50 and average marks is less than or equal to 60. Then I'll say grade equals to C, right? So you have to format your code properly. So now C, okay, then else, okay, I will just simply say grade equals F, okay. So this is how basically you write it. So otherwise what actually happens, you write else and you open a curly brace, then if you open a curly brace, then else, then if, then else. So a lot of else if statements which are not more readable. So it will be very easy for you to say if, else if, else if, else. So this basically checks. If this is true, it will execute this. If this is false, it will come here and check the condition. If it is true, it will execute this. If this condition false, it comes here and then again check this and will execute. If this is also false, it comes here. So like that, there is a proper more readability that you'll have. So now here, since we are given 77.5, it should give me grade A. So now let me run this code. Okay, so I think I have unnecessarily closed this. So let me save it and run it. So now guys, you can see, okay, I did not print the grade. So that's why it's not printing. So after this end, after the end of this if else, right? So sorry. So where my if else is ending. So if I am writing it here, so this is where my else is ending. So what I need to do after this, I need to write my s out statement, right? I'll say grade is plus grade, right? So now I'll save it and then I'll run my code. Now let us see what basically happens. Now I got grade A. Now let me change this to 67.5. Then when I run this, it should be within this. So I should get grade B, right? So this is what is the range. So I got grade B. And then if I change this to 57 and save and run this, it should be in the grade C. Or if I give any other value, right, it should be fail, the grade F. So this is going to be very much helpful for you to write proper if-else statements by simplifying it with a more readability. So these are some of the rules that you guys need to keep in mind whenever you write your code in real time.